Welcome to Sky Notes. This week, we're diving into fashion, astrology, and the zodiac sign that's been acting up a lot in recent years. In this episode, Lillian and Tracy are joined by the fabulously sharp Greg Polkosnik, author of Starstruck Style and Cosmically Chic. He's an astrologer, writer, fitness instructor, fashion icon, and all around legend. Let's get in. Welcome, Greg.
Hi.
Hi, Lillian.
Welcome.
So we have so many fun things to talk about today. As you heard, Greg is a fashion icon in his own right, and so we're going to talk about some things to do with astrology and fashion today. It's very distracting because I have YouTube up here and it's on a delay, so it's laughing at all the wrong times.
Yeah.
Anyways, so my first, other than you, Greg, because you've been doing this forever and we've known each other since not long after birth.
Disclaimer, we were roommates.
I've known Greg since I was 8 years old. And I've been on the planet for
I
quite
love
a while.
that.
Yes.
And just one more thing here. Tracy did live with me in the 90s, I believe, right? Would have been the 90s, late 80s, 90s. And at that time, I had a tremendous library of astrology books, and she used to just always take my books and read them incessantly. So I think I may have contributed something to this
You
career
definitely
path.
didn't detract from it.
That's
really,
a lucky
Greg
connection.
Well, and he was probably one of my first dialoguing astrology friends to be, in reality.
Very helpful. That's
But
very
when I
helpful.
started to study more, and of course I was familiar with Greg and working with sun signs and astrology and things like that, but I saw a lecture, probably 2012. Neptune was just about to go into Pisces, and so the person was talking about these larger fashion arcs and looking at, from very early on, these different stages of fashion when it came to Neptune, because, Neptune being glamour and, escapism and that kind of thing, she had connected Neptune to fashion. So, Greg, do you have any thoughts on Neptune is moving into Aries? Do you connect Neptune with fashion, and do you have any thoughts about how it might shift?
I'm not really that convinced that Neptune plays the role that Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus play. However, right now, I think that there's a really interesting little dance going on between Neptune and Saturn that's going to really affect fashion, because right now we have that diffuse Neptune energy, Pisces energy that dissolves everything and changes the playing field before everything sort of solidifies back in Aries. These two planets, with Saturn being really, having quite different energy than Neptune, these two planets are sort of intertwined, and right now they're vacillating over that cusp. So I think that fashion's kind of undergoing a transition right now. On my blog, I predicted that this is going to be a time where that burn it all down energy is going to sort of solidify. I called this the year of false starts on my blog when I'm talking about these two planets dancing over the cusp. I think there's going to be a lot of that in fashion. However, the most interesting thing that's happened in fashion since these two planets have moved into Aries together is that a couple of the big houses, Celine and Dior, have new creative directors. And those two houses have just showed runway presentations. And the overarching message from these presentations is that, hey, you probably have enough in your closet already. Let's just start to work with these investment pieces and show you how to put them into a new context rather than going out and spending all your money, which is much different than the logo mania and those things like that we saw when all these planets were ganging up in Capricorn not too long ago. So this is taking us in a real different trajectory. Again, I think that's more something we'll see when Saturn moves through a particular sign, remember that Saturn moved through Pisces into Aries when grunge was in fashion. Okay, so we had that burn it all down energy. And if you look at the high school next door to the gym where I work, all the kids look like they're dressed in 1995, 1996. It's really, it's really something else. But I think you get that from your parents as well. And it's because, 28 years old, 30 years old, that's a common age to have kids for people. And lots of these kids are doing what their parents did before. They reject it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they embrace it. They're brought up by people that had lots of tattoos and probably were shaving their heads and had little goatees and all those things that we started to do in whenever Saturn was in Aries, 95? I guess 97, I guess, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 97.
Yeah, so I do see more, I see Saturn really being involved there. Uranus, I buy Uranus with the 7-year itch. I think 7 years is really when you sort of start to, say you've got a closet full of skinny jeans and you're just thinking, I need to change. It's that 7-year itch, I think, really works with Uranus. Funny thing with Uranus moving into Gemini now, Vogue magazine has articles all over saying, hey, skinny jeans are back. Maybe these big baggy jeans aren't it. And at the same time, there's other people say, wait a minute, trends are dead. We're not even following trends. You can wear whatever you want. And that's going to be a Gemini, a Uranus and Gemini thing. And I think Jupiter really just affects more the trend than the, if I said, the trend and the style, just the really immediate things. So with Jupiter in Cancer, maybe we're just going to be, maybe seeing a little more nostalgia and those those trends that are sort of rooted in the past. Fashion's always portraying itself as a very forward-looking art form. At least they do, and the editors do, the magazines do. They love the word modern, but then they slip into this habit of looking back incessantly. And I think maybe that's what we're going to see in the next round of shows is a lot of nostalgia. Who knows for what, but I think that it's going to be something that we'll see. And again, Neptune, I've looked at those articles that have really studied the sort of the meta trends, and I can buy what people are saying, but I just think maybe we're looking at fashion in the context of our own lives and what we're wearing now. And I think that 7-year cycle, which corresponds to Saturn as well, because Saturn has its own sort of 4 mini 7-year cycles. I think that those are probably the things that we need to look at when we're discussing meta trends.
I just remember that at the time, because Pisces rules the feet, and I had made some thinking about my own chart and my Pisces rising and how I baby my feet, that shoes were going to get more comfortable and less ridiculous because they were starting to get quite high. Well, they got, and actually there were several astrologers who were like, I think shoes are going to become absurd. And, the limits get taken off of it. And that is one trend that did, I was completely wrong and they were right. The shoes just got, shoes higher, like to the point where running shoes are 4 inches high, so it did actually go in that way. So
yeah, it's kind of hard to predict stuff like that. If I look back to my high school days, which would have been the early 80s, Birkenstocks were the laughing stock of us trendy kids. There couldn't have been anything more hideous, and now everybody's got them. So when would that, go back to sort of, I guess, the mid 70s? We would have to look at trends there. What do we hit? Well, maybe Chiron has something to do with it. It was 50 years ago. Who knows?
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's a lot to think about. I tend to work more in the immediate and write designer profiles and do those sort of things.
I like that, but there is like a fun delineation between like Bella Hadid getting draped in an AI experience versus what we need on our own to discover. And I'm curious to know, like, what is the spark of fashion? I felt like for my life, it didn't really begin. I'm sorry, I keep hitting my mic. Until 28, until I had my Saturn return. And then I slowly and diligently kind of looked up all of the things that could help me out with my style and how I wear clothing, and it feels like an ongoing discovery. So I love talking about high fashion because that's where I think the 4-inch heels come in. Myself, during the Pisces experience with Saturn, I have a basket of socks in my studio so that when I loosen up and wash my feet while I'm waiting to do something else, I can put warm and fuzzy socks on them. So I'm going to say the feet are being addressed in a cozy way.
Yeah, I could see that. So when you started writing your book with the sun signs, what kind of patterns did you notice off the top? Like, which things struck you that made you want to write a book about it?
Well, I started to study iconic people, iconic designers, sort of things like that. And I just sort of came to a bunch of conclusions based on those things. I'd like to look at their charts to sort of determine who had maybe a stronger sun, where the sun was maybe determining their sense of style or their creative direction, or in some cases where the rising sign was, maybe they were harmonizing, doing things like that. I looked into a lot of people and I had a huge database. I've got a really good memory, so I've been into fashion since I was a kid, and I was just maybe the right person to do it at the right time when I wrote my first book 25 years ago. And so that worked out for me. I think having solid examples is a really important part of this, but also having the good history, looking at people, finding out commonalities between people. For instance, when you find a couple of designers that sort of share the same birthday or have a lot in common, maybe Balenciaga and Dior, you try to find what made these guys work in couture. What made Yves Saint Laurent, who's a Leo, the founder of what they would call ready to wear? Because that didn't make a lot of sense to me. But when you look at these things, maybe that Leo graciousness, the ability to sort of find common ground for the peasants was Saint Laurent's motivation. Because even though he's, people call him the father of modern ready to wear, Saint Laurent was 100% a snob. Now, I'm not going to say that all Leos are snobs, but I don't think Leo, the sign can be magnanimous. That's what they're associated with, but it's not necessarily associated with sort of a socialism, a socialist outlook on fashion. So yeah, it was fun though. Like I put in the work in this stuff, and I'm kind of an encyclopedia of designer birthdays and model birthdays and all these things now, just because I've been into it for so long. When I wrote my second book, it was because the first book was something I sold mass market. I sold it to a publisher, and they kind of dictated it, and it was a little less sophisticated than my second book. My second book was the book I wanted to write, and my first book was the book that I was paid to write. Yeah.
Nice.
So.
Nice.
Nice.
Well, and you and I were talking about, you had noticed a pattern with Venus and Leo and Venus and in Virgo being a common thing with designers. And then we had noticed that the Venus and Leo designers named the brand after themselves, and the Venus house.
Yeah, those sort of things, when those things like that come up, you're like, oh, well, it just made sense. So, and I mean, everything that we do is, we observe these things, we try to find the commonalities. If I'm doing it with fashion, that's because that's my specialty. Other people do it with other things. I'm always reaching out on my blog, asking people about questions about Chiron and physical health, because I just don't think people are talking about it enough. I'm waiting for that one person to say, hey, I've made the connection. Here's the book I wrote about it, because I see that in my own chart all the time. And I want somebody to be invested as that as I was in this, and have been for more than 2 decades.
Very cool.
We'll
So
put
yes,
that in some of the social media,
Yeah.
for sure.
let people know.
Definitely. Yesterday, Greg, you mentioned something about patterns with Venus, like looking for. I guess my question is, what other things would you look at? Like if somebody is looking to find the best expression of their own style, somebody who maybe is at a transitionary period in their life, or they're young and they don't quite know um, which direction to go, especially because there aren't a lot of rules right now. And uh, correct me if I'm wrong, I find fashion right now is not very flattering to a lot of body types. And it's the same problem that I had with it the first time it came around. High jeans, short shirts don't
Interesting.
look great on everybody.
Really interesting. So when Saturn was in Pisces and Neptune was in Pisces, over the last couple of years, a lot of the talk, especially I guess with like the Neptune and Pisces era, a lot of talk turned to genderless expression through clothing. One of the hard things one of the hard truths people learn when they're talking about genderless clothing is that generally women are smaller, men are bigger. So now you want to go out and make a genderless line of fashion, you're going to end up resizing your clothing. I'll tell you a little story about myself. There's a label called Mex, a Dutch label that was around for years. They had retail stores, and I really liked Mex, and I was a large in Mex. When Mex started to make clothes for the Asian market, they kind of changed their sizing. And when they went into Asian markets, they went down to extra smalls that they didn't have before and up to extra larges. All of a sudden I was an extra large in Mex, wearing the same stuff that I was wearing. And I could like literally pull out a shirt and put one against the other. And I said, am I an extra large? I don't want to be an extra large, but I'm a big guy. There's nothing about the size on the garment that tells me anything about myself that I don't already know. I had to suck it up and wear an extra large. When you get to genderless clothing, that makes it even worse. So I'll just give you an example. So Birkenstocks makes sandals that are very popular. If a 15 or so, maybe 15, I'll go a little younger, 13-year-old boy, or maybe I'll say an 11-year-old boy that wants a pair of, like, say, Birkenstock Boston clogs now, goes into a store, he's probably not going to find his youth size, because Birkenstocks are European sizes. So they'll go from 34 up to 46 or whatever like that in a normal store run. But this kid is going to have a small foot. He's probably going to have to go to the women's section to find his Boston clog, which is an identical shoe in the men's section, but it's a Birkenstock regular fit, which is a men's D width. A Birkenstock narrow fit in the women's section is going to be a B width. A Birkenstock wide is going to be an E or a double E, but they have these European sizes on them. So now that kid's going to go and he's probably going to have a crisis when he realizes that the shoe in the women's department fits him better than the shoe in the men's department, or else they're not going to have that shoe in the men's department at all. This is what's happened with genderless clothing in this Pisces era, where we kind of blurred the lines because we wanted people to be able to go and fit into whatever they wanted. But then people have this concept in the back of their mind that says, wait a minute, I'm not this size, I'm not this gender, whatever. They come in with all these preconceived notions, and right away they are taken aback and saying, this isn't for me, I can't do this. So it happens. So right now, Tracy, you're looking at high-waisted jeans. There's a lot of people out there with body types that probably love high-waisted jeans because they fit their bodies, and that's fine. There's a lot of everything out there. I think we just need to go out and find it. And I think one thing that happens is as we have gone through several cycles of fashion, is that we start to kind of reject trends and we just sort of wear what's right for us. Finding the things that are right for us should be a little easier in this age of the internet, but then again, it isn't, because people do things like Mex did, where they go and all of a sudden change their size run. That gets into the head of their consumers. It messes them up. And so it's just a confusing time. And again, with Neptune and Pisces, all this confusion has come out. Maybe things will solidify and we'll get back to something like that. But you and I both have been through this sort of genderless, gender expression of fashion in the 80s before, with Boy George and Prince in the early 80s. We saw all this stuff come out. So when people talk about this, no genders in fashion stuff today, we sort of think about it and go, yeah. And then what happened right after? We went right back to George Michael, and
Right.
that video where he blew up the jukebox wearing a wife beater and a pair of Levi's 501s. And all of a sudden, boys were back
That's
in
so
fashion.
good.
It's just,
But I
it's a
think
cycle.
about this book, I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but this is Nancy Taylor's course on fashion from originally 1958, but this version from the 66 era. And it changed how I look at fashion, because I'm a bigger girl and I have curves, and it talked a lot about foundation garments. So I wonder if it's the rules. Like, would you say that fashion has rules? And so if you're creating a dress for a woman who typically has certain dimension, you're going to want to accommodate those rules. You don't just toss them out and wear it and scare them however you want. I wonder, would you say that clothing has rules?
Oh, yeah, it does have some rules. Like foundation garments are going to be more important during certain eras when other styles are prominent. So maybe if you go back into the 90s when all these bias cut Dior dresses were the thing, that way of cutting a dress, that way of letting the fabric sort of fall onto a woman's body is just naturally more flattering, and it needs less foundation garments. When you get into other things, more structured silhouettes, they're going to need more. And so those things kind of ebb and flow as well. Now, if we could just connect them all to something in particular, like right now, Jupiter's in Cancer, maybe we should be seeing more corseted clothing. Maybe the waistline is going to come back in. The problem with this, though, is the designers are always designing something about a year ahead of when it actually hits the runway, so that maybe we're not going to see this stuff happen until a year after, and then Jupiter's already moved into another sign, and maybe we're onto something else in our heads. So it's always a little dance between these things, and it makes it a little harder to predict. I do try to make predictions, though, on my own blog about fashion, because I think that any astrologer worth their weight in Jackie Stallone headbands is got to put their money where their mouth is. And so I try to predict, and I'm predicting sort of a rebirth of punk, because I don't think punk has really hit hard with sort of the current state of the world and the economy for young people. I think we're just ripe for another punk revolution. And if you really go back to the roots of punk, you're like 1975, London. Maybe Chiron has a role in here that I haven't yet explored.
Nice.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely.
Malcolm McLaren, right? Started punk.
So Malcolm McLaren's a really interesting person to talk about. Malcolm McLaren was an Aquarius, and I think Malcolm McLaren was one of the world's greatest rip-off artists. At the same time, he was brilliant. He was brilliant at doing it, and it was the people that he was working with. I'd give more credit to Vivienne Westwood, who was an Aries, and that makes a lot of sense. That the Queen of Punk was an Aries.
Yes, I agree. Well, and then another question, and I'm trying to kind of follow the flow, but I have a real question about costume, and it could go in several different ways. So Tracy could go drag queen. It could go, I would like to dress like a clown. I'm working on a face, and then I'm going to work on a costume. So how do you see that kind of eccentric or out of the mainstream addressing or addressing fashion?
I would look at maybe planets in your first house. I would look at your rising sign because, you're going to see the drama probably in the fifth house. You're probably going to see the drama in the 12th house. I do relate the 12th house a lot to costumey kind of fashion. So if you've got some 12th house influences, I would look there for the people that kind of really have maybe more of a fantastic version of themselves that they'd like to live out. Again, probably either the people that probably really do it every day, or maybe have some profound fifth house influences. The people that dream of doing it, maybe
Nice.
12th house
That makes
influences,
sense.
and that just makes sense. Yeah, these are really easy
Yeah.
connections for anybody to make. I just have written them down.
Yeah. It's cool. It's really cool.
Thanks.
So,
Yeah.
you in your when you wrote Starstruck Style, and you were who were you writing horoscopes for at the time?
I worked for Teen Vogue. I was the astrologer at Teen Vogue when they first launched. Actually, I was the second astrologer. They had a test launch, and the legendary Athena Star Woman was the astrologer. And I took over for her. Then I wrote horoscopes for Nylon, which is another fashion magazine. It was pretty much an underground magazine. That was the best job I ever had.
Yeah.
They just gave me free creative
good.
reign to do whatever I wanted. And I
Good.
was writing for Harper's Bazaar. Harper's Bazaar, when they first went online, hired me to do horoscopes. And then
Nice.
the editor-in-chief changed, and fashion has a revolving door at any time. But when that happens, usually it's time to clear out all the old staff and bring in the new.
Right. And so at the time, I remember that you spoke with oh gosh, me and names. Who hosts Drag Race?
RuPaul.
Yeah. So
RuPaul.
you got to have a conversation with RuPaul. And did you learn anything interesting at that time, or?
Well, the interesting thing that I've learned about RuPaul is that RuPaul is literally one of the most profound, serious people you would ever meet in your life. And the persona that he plays on TV is this warm, loving, outgoing person. And he is deep, like deep, deep as the ocean, and in his real life. And he likes to goof around, but he's a Scorpio. I think he's a Gemini rising. And he's a lot different when you actually talk to him. But typically one of the best senses of humor of anybody you would ever meet. And he loves anything unique. He was just interested to talk to me because I just had such a ridiculous angle on what I wanted to do. I had an old blog, a fashion blog, and I used to write anonymously. And I had this I kind of have a love-hate relationship with fashion. I think fashion, when people, dress for cocktail hour 24/7, is just the stupidest thing in the world. Your clothes need to sort of reflect your lifestyle, and you can dream about these ridiculous lifestyles, but 99.99% of us don't ever get to live those lifestyles. And so when fashion lapses into these very impractical places, editorially, when all the magazines are sort of perpetuating that stuff, I just kind of laugh it off. So I started a really ridiculous campaign to make a holiday called Wear a Gown to Work Day. And really, I was making fun of that. And RuPaul was the first spokesperson for Wear a Gown to Work Day, because he was traditionally the person I know that wears the most gowns.
That's awesome. I will say I suggested to the ladies in my office, many of whom were single, this was probably 15 years ago, that I would be glad for any of them to wear my wedding dress, which was like a size US 24, so they could just flip it on over if they felt a yearning, and that if we wanted to, we could have wedding dress Fridays at work. But it never caught on because of the ridiculousness.
Yeah, I like that. I think, so we were talking before we started recording today, and I found out that you have a Cancer moon. I look back at everything that we've ever done, with a real tongue-in-cheek way. And I think that's You know, there's cancers that are nostalgic because they yearn for those days, and there's cancers that look back and go, what were we thinking? So you know, maybe we share that, Lillian.
I think so. You know, the first experience I had with fashion, I was thinking about it as we were getting started. It was my great aunt, who was she made me call her Aunt Florence, had clothing from her youth. And I'm a big girl now. I was big then. And everything was so tiny. And I couldn't figure out what the difference in size was. So it felt like fashion was inaccessible to me, right? I was just going to be a big clunky girl. And then I tried other things. I mean, I think if you recall, if this was part of your sort of world, heavier girls could wear purple polyester pants with a seam going down the front and any shirt they wanted to. So when things started to open up and I had money, I would go to Nordstrom, or if I traveled for work in Chicago or New York, I'd make a point of going to the different stores. And for the first 4 years, I would say I regularly bought things that poorly and looked ridiculous that were expensive. And I was really shocked by, you know, what would it take to wear something that felt really good and also looked really good? And what are the secrets to presentation? So I love that. And then I think back to like Edith Head, you know, and stylists. So is that part of your oeuvre as well, to look at the stylists and costumers? And it might not be. The designer is certainly a full meal.
A lot of my book was actually inspired, you know, when I was looking back and trying to make connections between people, was inspired by cinema. And so you get these costume designers like Edith Head, who's a Scorpio.
Yeah.
I actually talk about Edith Head in her relationship to Hitchcock, and Hitchcock had a Scorpio muse in his movies named Grace Kelly, who is sort of the standard bearer for that cool Scorpio style. So I've made those connections as well. As far as your own experience with fashion, I will say something about like just fashion nowadays. The internet has really changed fashion because we can really get whatever we want nowadays. It never used to be that way. So I think people from our generation sometimes have a perception of fashion that it hasn't really changed. I think when you get into stores and actually see the amount of clothing that you can find not only in stores but online nowadays, it's kind of everything everywhere all at once. It's confusing, but some people will dismiss it based on these preconceived notions of how hard it was when we were younger to find whatever we wanted, because there wasn't as much back then. So I think it's just something that we need to explore nowadays, because I do believe that it's a lot less rigid than it was before. And again, we just take these preconceived notions into our shopping trips, and I don't think we need to do that anymore.
I agree.
So because you incorporate, when we talked about the outer planets, you brought up Uranus. So what are your thoughts on switching from Uranus from Taurus to Gemini? What can you see shifting in terms of fashion and self-expression with that shift? Especially while we're going through this time of it not actually committing to being in the sign yet. You know, we're all sort of going through this weird back and forth. So what do you think?
Well, if we look at the last 7 years, for the luxury business have been tremendous. It's grown tremendously. If you think of Taurus as a materialistic sign, that makes a lot of sense. All of a sudden now the bottom is falling out of the luxury market. I believe that we're going to have maybe some changes with maybe more mass market labels. One thing that's changed really in the last several years, in fact, when I wrote my first book, it would have been the late 90s, 2000, when I actually submitted the manuscript. There were lines that they would call contemporary lines. So you would have Donna Karan and you would have DKNY. You would have Dior and you'd have Miss Dior, you'd have Valentino and Red Valentino. I don't know if this, like, those are just examples. I don't know if they were actually around at that time, all of these brands. But secondary lines were really super important because a lot of people wanted the look, but they didn't want the price. So now with Uranus and Taurus, we have the like impossibly expensive brands like Loro Piana and Brunello Cucinelli, these brands that make clothing out of materials that are super rare, super expensive. The Row is one. And they pride themselves upon this, if you know aesthetic. For instance, oh, it's right behind me there. I won't grab it. I have a Bottega Veneta wallet. So if you know fashion, Bottega Veneta has a weaving technique that is very much their signature. No labels, no logos. In fact, their brand motto was when your own initials are enough. So they don't put big BVs all over everything. You don't see people walking down the street with a shirt that says Bottega Veneta across it, because that's kind of antithetical to their brand existence. That was really big in Taurus, as well as logomania itself was really big in Taurus. We, over the last few years, we've just seen things covered in Louis Vuitton logos, Gucci logos, and stuff like that. But again, the bottom just fell out of that market. So maybe with Uranus and Gemini, because people aren't going to be able to afford those clothes, which is a very likely scenario. They jacked up the prices so high on all these things, and that's a proven fact. You can go and look into fashion and see that they've made things 150%, 200% more expensive than they were just 3 or 4 years ago. And that's probably why they're not selling anything at Gucci, and their stock is down 25%. At the same time, as those things are happening, I expect contemporary labels, what they used to call contemporary labels, the secondary labels, maybe that will be what comes out of Gemini, with the idea of having 2 labels. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah,
so let's see if that happens. Maybe there's going to be they're going to be relaunching versus Versace rather than just Versace.
I wonder too about, because with Gemini's association with the hands and the fiddling of the hands, if handmade becomes a bigger thing. I know sometimes it gets associated with Taurus, but Gemini can be much, anyways, can also be associated with hands and handmade and creating things, but small kind of throwaway things, not Taurus things that you want to have forever. I always think of Taylor Swift and the little friendship bracelets. To me, that's a very Gemini sort of energy. So a little bit more of that kind of weird, kitschy stuff.
I agree. I agree about the friendship bracelets and the hands for Gemini. I remember my first book. This is funny. It just popped into my head. I suggested that Geminis don't let their hands turn into junkyards. Because that can kind of happen too. Yeah.
Well, it is the
That's a
accessory
deft turn of phrase.
sign, right? Like, I know that I was, when I was doing some studying about the ascendant, that often you'd read that Gemini ascendant tends to really like to have the matching accessories.
Well, I call Gemini the accessory sign, and it's really interesting here. So I have some issues with Geminis that we might talk about sometime in this hour. Anyway, my favorite celebrity of all time is Joan Rivers, who is a Gemini. So I mean, it's not like I hate every Gemini or that I look at them in a certain way. Joan Rivers had an accessory line. The one there's a couple people that we sort of associated with accessories, but really the queen of jewelry was Wallis Simpson, the Duchess of Windsor. It was probably the most famous accessory wearer of all time. And she was a Gemini, so that's kind of interesting.
It is interesting for sure.
I like that.
Yeah. So I could see with Uranus and Gemini that we see a lot more of that. It becomes more accessorized. Things become more accessorized.
And it goes along with the idea that people have less money. Like that's a fact right now. People are starting to feel this. They're starting to feel that, hey, everything's going up, but my wages haven't gone up. How am I going to express myself through fashion?
Exactly.
And so that might be the saving grace for a lot of people, because I like expensive stuff. I like nice stuff. I like well-crafted, unique things. But hey, there comes a time when I got to say, hey, I can't afford that anymore.
That's fair.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just have
Yeah.
one more fashion thing I want to bring up, and then because when we shift to the Gemini thing, we're totally going a totally different
We need to
direction.
go to Gemini and stay
So
in
we'll get
Gemini.
there, but I don't want to leave fashion quite yet. So there's a trend, and I'm curious to know where you think this is coming from astrologically, Greg. In the last couple of years, where women are proudly growing out their gray hair and they've stopped coloring their hair, and it's this pronouncement of, look at how good I am at doing this thing, which I don't quite get. So where's that being born out of? I mean, it was born out of COVID, really, but astrologically, where do you see that coming from?
Let's just talk maybe about Capricorn. So Pluto has left Capricorn. I think Pluto and Capricorn, I'm a Capricorn, I have a Capricorn sun sign. It made me sort of understand some things about Capricorn. Of course, you're going to have people who represent the best qualities of their sign, the worst qualities of their signs. I remember that astrologer Sydney Omar used to make these horoscope books, and that's how I got into astrology. I would read my newspaper sun sign horoscope by Sydney Omar. Then I started to buy his annual forecast, but he had introductions into all of his books, and he had key phrases for all the sign. I don't know if these were his key phrases, I can't remember now, but he always had for Capricorn, I use as the Capricorn motto.
Oof.
Now, I don't ever want to
My
think of myself
goodness.
as a user, but maybe there's some truth to that. I think when Pluto was in Capricorn for a long time, what we saw was a desire for people to be authentic on one hand, and at the same time to capitalize on the idea of being authentic. That's where these people are born out of. They're online heralding how special they are by bucking a trend with something that's really kind of like personal and intimate. And they say that they're doing it to empower themselves and to empower others. Usually it's just to line a bank account. That's what influencers do. So now we're sort of we've moved on from this age of influencers into something else. So over the next 20 years, we'll see how people use technology to promote themselves online. I could be accused of that too. I mean, I wrote a book in 2000 and had a website that I was trying to sell my books on. We all do it. It's just a part of that. It's just how that there was simultaneously a call for authenticity, while there was also an authenticity deficit because people were capitalizing on that trend. And that's a Capricorn thing. And really, like, I mean, it really happened. You look at that 20 years while Pluto was in Capricorn, you can kind of trace that line. It'd be interesting to explore that in depth.
Fair enough.
Well, I think of Capricorn, just for the record, as being very female, like being the nourishing place of the earth, the place where we derive our form from, and therefore the rules are there. But I think of that statement more as able to make use of, which is quite a rare thing in the world. So it may stand out more with Capricorns, but the reciprocity with Capricorn is pretty stunning. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, people talk about they talk about Capricorn and Cancer and the corresponding houses that they rule, like the 4th and the 10th. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but I've noticed this a lot. It's like some people look at one side as the mother and one side as the father, then other people have reversed that. I've read this over years and years of reading astrology books. And I think of Cancer as a pretty hard sign. And because I think of Cancer as being the black widow spider that eats its mate, or the gerbil that eats a baby that didn't survive, as well as being that nurturing, loving mother. So I think there's a real dichotomy between this mother and father role with Cancer and Capricorn that we need to explore as well. Somebody needs to write that book too.
I like that. And then I wanted to comment on authenticity. Sorry, because I wanted to say our motto in North Carolina, entertainingly enough, is called Esse Quam Videre, which means it's better to be the thing than to seem like you are the thing. And that seems to describe the opportunity to leverage authenticity as a trend.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Interesting. Are we ready to talk about Geminis?
Yeah, if you want to get into some trouble.
Well, I think it's an interesting timing because I'm going to say I feel like a lot of the magnification of, the bad Geminis is having Jupiter, amplifying them just in terms of attention that they're getting, and so we got to hear and see and experience the bad behavior. So and full disclaimer, I'm surrounded by Geminis. I'm married to a Gemini.
I
love Geminis. But we do see these patterns, and it's funny, Lillian, Greg said, I don't know how political you get. We try to be diplomatic, but we have pretty strong opinions behind the scenes. So.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome to toss stuff in. We should be able to match it.
Yeah. So tell me how you came to the bad Gemini's conclusion and all the posts that you put up about it.
Okay. So when I used to go on Twitter and try to find other astrologers to talk to, I found Twitter was just like a junkyard. This was before I quit Twitter because it became even more of a cesspool. But I found Twitter was a junkyard for astrologers. The reason for that was because the people that were always getting the greatest traffic were the people that were courting controversy and posting ridiculous things. The post that says, "Hey, if you're an air sign or a fire sign, or you have planets in this house, then you're going to do this." And then I've literally written blog posts where I've done the math with these posts and said, okay, if you're this, that means that 92% of people have one of the things that you just mentioned in this post, and the other 8% that you don't. So of course, your prediction's probably going to come true. There was just so much garbage like that. Plus, there was also a lot of hostility on Twitter for people having different ideas. Now, Tracy and I have talked about this in person before, where I've even asked her about people that you've met at conferences and people you have relationships with, because they're just lovely to you in person and they're just assholes on Twitter. so I just started to sort of get a little fast and loose on Twitter myself. I noticed in Donald Trump's orbit that there was a lot of Geminis and a lot of Capricorns. And at one point I was like tallying up like cabinet members, and a third were Geminis, a third were Capricorns, and then other people, sort of other signs populated the rest, the final third. I thought, statistically, this is really weird. So I started two threads on Twitter. One was a horrible Gemini thread, and one was a horrible Capricorn thread. And I had them both running there for a long time. But I made this collage at one point of a bunch of people in American politics, all who talk out of both sides of their mouths constantly, proven liars, and they're all Geminis. And I just started posting this thing. I'm off Twitter now, but I put it on Instagram, I put it on my blog, I put it on Threads. And I've come up with sort of, second versions of it. I haven't pursued the Capricorn one, and maybe I should, but it was just sort of a running joke. But I have Jupiter in Gemini, but I don't see much of myself in Gemini. I even have a third house Mercury, and I don't see much of myself in Gemini. And so it's just making fun of the cliches that define astrology and that we all carry with us as astrologers and people in general. It's not meant maliciously. It's just pointing something out and pointing out commonalities, and that's one of the things that we do, even if we don't admit it to ourselves. So again, I was having fun with it. It's just turned into something else now because there's so many of the people on those 2 collages that I just personally loathe, and I think the world would be a better place if they were to step away from the public spotlight altogether.
Well, and to emphasize, it wasn't just the States, because here at home in
Oh, yeah.
Edmonton, we had our own bad Geminis that were contributing and are contributing to the toxicity of that, what that sign is displaying. So it wasn't, we were seeing a pattern of it all over, not
Well,
just
yeah, it
in
was
the US
worldwide.
politics.
the Americans on our populate most of these photos and the collages that I've been sharing with everybody. But I also have some other autocratic leaders, including Xi of China and Orban and Poilievre, who is tried to be prime minister in Canada and was rejected soundly, and now is pulling a lot of BS in the province where Tracy and I reside. Yeah, it's there. It's just it's a lack of genuineness with me that bugs me. Maybe as a sun sign Capricorn, I'm probably going to find the least amount of commonality with Geminis and with Leos, the signs that are in conjunct to my sun. That's kind of how astrology, traditional astrology, sort of looks at these things. Tracy had mentioned in a conversation we had that maybe it's the person on the cusp of your 12th house that you might find as number 12 on your list if you had to rank them.
Yes.
And you said, I believe Aquarius is there, Tracy, on yours? And I sort of laughed right away because it's like Tracy's confided some issues to me in the past that she's had with Aquarian natives. But it's funny. It's like I said, I make fun of this stuff. So even on my blog, every year I have, at the end of the year, I have a ranking of the signs that have bugged me the most. And
I love that.
Aries used to be my whipping post, and I've actually even put Aries as number 1 over the years that I've been doing this, because at some point Gemini started to bug me even more. But these rankings, they move up and down. Gemini just seems to be at the bottom lately. And I think we need to acknowledge that. We need to have fun with that stuff, and because honestly, a lot of that stuff brings us together. It doesn't divide us. When we look at these things like that. Tracy, when she said the thing about the sign in your 12th house, I thought Virgo. I actually just quit a full-time job, and it really had everything to do with a triumvirate of Virgos at the top of the chain that don't seem to want to work collaboratively with the people below them. At the same time, though, Virgos have been my best friends forever. It's like, I've been friends with Tracy since we were kids. When you lived with me, probably my best friends were, you remember Rick, you remember Kelly, like I was surrounded by Virgos all the time. So I'm not sure that's where I see it.
Yeah, I find phases. So for a while, I was at my lowest, but I felt Leos showing up everywhere with really good information. And now it's swinging back to Virgo. So I resonate with what you're saying.
And who bugs you, Lillian?
Oh, Libra, and it's less that they bug me. It's more, when you get into an argument and you're convinced you know what someone's thinking, and then the emotions pass and you realize that's pure insanity. I feel like that's my experience with Libra.
With Libras, yeah. I have Libra rising.
I have no idea.
Libras haven't bugged me that much for the last little bit there, but the vacillation.
She has Libra.
Can drive me crazy. Hey, what do you want to do? I know. What do you want to do?
You get that.
I love that. I love it. Well, Tracy's got Libra, right? You've got Libra.
I've got a stellium in Libra. Yeah.
Yeah, she's got a ton of 7th house. In fact, I have something on my blog one time, and you responded to it, Tracy, because I actually put out there. I said, rank these signs in the 12 things that rank the signs from top to bottom, what you feel the most, what you feel the least in your own character. And I think I probably have Gemini and Leo at the bottom, and that was just natural. But I remember you picked Libra as the sign that you feel the most, and it was because of all the 7th house things. And I get that from you too. But I also really get your Virgo earthiness and practicality, those things. I mean, you've always had those things about you. Mm-hmm.
But also, I had a progressed sun in Libra for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that just changed this year.
Oh, really?
I'm going to tell you, I feel like that Libra stuff is not, I wouldn't put it at the top of my list anymore. I would put Virgo or Aries up at the top now. So that is a big part of the story for sure. What's going on with progression for sure.
Oh yeah, I feel the same way all the time too. I have Cancer elevated in my chart, Cancer in the 9th house, and honestly, it's the one thing that I feel probably, I believe I feel that the least. People say, oh yeah, maybe you're moody or something like that. I'll tell you a story about being moody. Do you guys watch Real Housewives? No? Okay. So Erica Jane is a Cancer. And I'll always remember an episode
don't watch it.
when Erica Jane had a migraine headache. And she wanted to film with the rest of the ladies, but she kind of just wanted to be left alone. So she's just sitting quietly at the end of the table, not saying anything, not doing anything. And people kept saying, well, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she had told them 10 times already that she had a headache. And eventually at one point, she just turned around and said, you know what? I'm not mad at anybody, but I'm mad now because you guys won't stop asking me what's wrong. So now I have, for lack of a better term, resting bitch face when I'm concentrating. And I work in retail. And I remember people would come up to me, and I even said this in a job interview when asked about the worst quality that I have. And I said, it's when I have a look on my face that to me is expressionless, that I'm not thinking about anything. And somebody walks up to me and has the audacity to say, hey, what's wrong? That's when this Cancer moodiness comes out, and I just sort of snap and turn on people. So I would rank Cancer like pretty low on my list, but it comes out.
Yeah, no, I love that because it is important to know how it feeds through different signs. I'm a Sagittarius sun. So I hated Cancer, the Cancer part of me. What a pain in the ass. I'm on the run. I got stuff to do. I got to do an adventure. Why am I like all of a sudden crying and wanting to be that? And then I reversed it and tried to live through the Cancer and made myself safe. And
can I ask you a question, Lillian? This is very interesting to me because with a Cancer sun, and you said Scorpio rising, correct?
Sagittarian sun, Scorpio rising.
And a Cancer moon. See, I find that Sagittarians, in some ways, they're the worst people to fight with because they like to fight, but they're also the fastest people to forgive. Do you find you're not as forgiving as most Sagittarians because of those other two placements? Are you a grudge holder?
Oh, I would say I don't get over stuff, but I don't blame people. So I have a Mars in Virgo. So the worst case scenario is I'll start working on myself, and I have to delineate, like, you're not fixing anything if nothing's wrong with you and you just don't like them.
Where's your Jupiter? Because we're born the same year, but you're born.
I have a Jupiter retrograde in Leo at 4 degrees. So it's trying my Sun and my Venus.
Yeah.
From the 9th house.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to be in a fight with you.
I love fighting. And I don't know how to explain it to people who don't like to fight. Like, it is literally nothing personal, and you can make the rules.
Oh yeah, that's such a Sagittarius sentiment, especially with this Real Housewives stuff. I've talked about Real Housewives on my blog like you wouldn't believe. I don't do it that much anymore because their fans are so hostile to everything that you post. but I've talked about Sagittarian housewives in that exact context, what you just described. So you'd make a good Real Housewife. Real Housewives of Durham, North Carolina.
Yeah, I just need to get to the right price bracket, and I'm in.
Well, I can't believe we did this. We did an hour. We're almost done. Greg, what's next for you? What do you got? You said you have some irons in the fire. What do you got going on?
Well, I've been in a bit of a creative drought myself. I just find it hard to sit at the computer. I actually had an injury that's caused me not to be able to sit for a long time, like an injury to the front of my hip. And that's another reason why I quit my full-time job. I'm just going to work in this fall. I just need to sort of find more gainful employment because I'm not working as much as I'd like to. But I've just come to this realization, which I've come to 1,000 times before in my life, that I'm better at doing 100 things at once than doing one thing all the time. And I'm back to that again. I've written books in my spare time. I'd like to do that. I'd like to try to maybe find another project that's more inspiring. But the problem now is, like you guys would know this too. I used to be able to write for magazines. I used to be able to write for books. The whole market has changed. And the worst part about it is that you can't put anything out there without getting ripped off the very next day. And that doesn't align with my Capricorn sensibilities. So it makes it hard for me to want to do another project like that. But I had, 18 years in between my last couple of books. So I'm sure I've got another one in me.
Well, I can't wait to see what you come up with.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much, Lillian and Greg. Lillian, do you have any final questions or
So
thoughts?
much fun. Well, just thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk with you. And what I get from what you say is there's a real level of quality, and that is always a delight to find, because I find that missing quite a bit in the internet world,
Oh, that's nice to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week. Everybody take care.
Bye.
See ya.